Hey, welcome to the Art Condition Podcast, a weekly show that will discuss the business, community, and often undiscussed stress and mental health concerns of being a professional artist, or even a serious hobbyist. I'm Joby. I've been in the tattoo and illustration professions for 25 years. My co-host is Moose, a data analyst, social media manager, and art agent. If you enjoy the content, please consider visiting the Patreon page in the show notes to help support the effort. Or if that's not an option, please like, subscribe, leave a good review, or just share with your friends. And definitely go visit the links of our guests on this episode. Thanks for listening, and have a great day. This week we are talking to Spencer Gordon. Spencer is an oil painter in the style of the old Impressionist masters. His work is shown in local galleries of the Seattle area, and until COVID ended large gatherings of people, he was holding workshops for students who wanted to learn his approach to painting. We talk at great length with Spencer about the process of getting your work shown in galleries. For many artists, this process is a hazy mystery, but Spencer is able to put the world of galleries into a simplified perspective that gives artists an easy-to-follow roadmap. This doesn't mean that if you're an artist trying to get into the gallery world, your experience will match Spencer's exactly, but this conversation will give you solid landmarks to look for when you're in the wilderness. Take this information and apply it to the resources that you have available in your own life. We then launch into a conversation that I hope you will find as fascinating as I did. We discuss the use of NFTs in combination with traditional art. NFTs are a divisive subject, and currently they are making everything so much more complicated. But I think one thing is undeniable. They are here to stay. And so I hope that conversations like this one will help sort out the mess and lead to a healthy and productive relationship with this new technology. Quick note about my co-host this week. Moose was laid out by his second dose of the vaccine, so he had to sit this one out. But our good friend Leeahd was good enough to jump in and co-host for this episode. It was the perfect combination of voices, considering Leeahd is a very accomplished traditional artist himself, as well as having some very well-considered opinions about the world of NFTs. Please see Leeahd's links in the show notes, along with Spencer's. And without further delay, here is our conversation with Spencer Gordon. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into art? And swirled up in the snow cone and frozen in the block of ice.
How did I get stuck in this? Yeah, like when did I get frozen in? I'm a traditional artist. I usually work with oil paint. I've been working as an artist for I would say there's a beginning point that's a little nebulous because you start selling stuff before you call yourself a professional. So I usually draw the line about 2014, 2015, somewhere right in there. I've been studying since, I studied for about 7-8 years. Like immediately after high school, I did like a 6 months of me time and then went straight into it, and have been slow rolling it at first until I found my way to an atelier. At first it was art schools and self-taught. So I don't know. Now I've kind of worked my way into landscape painting mostly, impressionism. I showed a gallery here in Seattle, and I've been kind of enjoying it for a long time.
I should mention before we go too quickly down the road too, that Moose is feeling low today. He's been put down by his second shot of the vaccine. So we are joined by Leeahd, has been good enough to jump in and play co-host for the day.
Hey everyone.
Yeah, so I'm so used to just rolling right into it. I totally forgot to.
I can just pretend to be
Everybody's
Moose.
like,
okay.
Who is this guy?
Welcome everyone. I'm Moose.
Moose is being played now by
Moose your hair.
some other dude. But in seriousness, did you go to art school, Spencer, or is it mostly self-guided, self-taught?
I did kind of a 3-part thing where initially I went to art school and I did about 6 months of traditional art school, and then I just couldn't afford it. So I dropped out for a bit, and I did self-taught for a couple of years with the occasional class. Like whenever I could afford one, I'd go take that one class, and then another 3 months after that one was over, I'd be able to afford another. And then I got lucky enough to run into somebody who runs an atelier, which is an old school style of art school here in Seattle, and right across the water in Bellevue, actually. But yeah, she took me under her wing and was like, "I've seen your work, and I'm gonna help you go further with this." So she decided to take me on as a protege, and I studied with her for 4 years total, kind of overlapping with when I started working, and I just continued to study with her, and then I continued to work as an assistant afterwards for her. So that was a big help as well. She was my initial connection very much into the community.
That sounds like a classic, like a real atelier, because so often these art schools they say atelier, which basically means like non-credited art school that you
Yeah.
pay for classes.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of con artistry, basically, in without trying to butter it up too much. It's very clearly like there's a lot of ateliers that are people teaching private classes and just saying, I don't have any accreditation, this isn't going to be worth anything, but here's a diploma that means nothing. Technically, that's in the same state as how Valerie's is, because there's no accreditation place for ateliers, but she runs it like an old school Rembrandt style, atelier, and she doesn't push somebody further unless they can go further. So she's very careful about that, and I think there's 2 of us now too. So it's also a very new atelier to actually launching artists. So I'm case study number 1.
Well, it's working. It's an interesting tangent that I hadn't thought of until now. This talking to you a little bit about this idea of ateliers, because I think that it is an important part of this conversation that we're about to have, and it's something that kind of flies under the radar. Like it's something that people aren't largely aware of. Like kind of like unless you're in the fine art world, or you've been privy to it in some way. The concept of an atelier, I mention it often, and people don't know what I'm talking about. Why do you think that is? Like, what is, like, once you're in it, it seems to make so much sense. Like, of course, this is how you would do it. This is far superior to anything else that you're going to be able to, get a hold of. As far as like if you want to learn like old school craftsmanship, of painting and draftsmanship and stuff. Why aren't they better known?
I'm not sure exactly, and in some cases, because there are a few that are really well known, but I think it's largely just that there were too many con artists. Like the lack of accreditation early in bringing ateliers into the modern world after the Depression, basically, and moving over to the new continent and things like that didn't really happen for ateliers. They stayed in the old world. They only really had the masters who would hand it down from one to another, still in Europe, pretty much. So like one by one they start to die off, and then they start to not have a good protege to take over, or they don't make enough money, and eventually they just start whittling themselves down because there was no plan to push it forward into the future. It was very much a patriarchal system that just has no future. They didn't plan for having no sons, basically. So it's I think the modern one's not really taking off, though, is something that there's too much there's just not enough accreditation for it. Nobody has gotten a real way to make any metric for it, and the traditional metrics for art schools are very much pushing against it because of the old alliances with ateliers and galleries, which pushed them out entirely. So now there's weird rivalry.
Well, I have a question, and kind of touching on that subject is your, I forget her name, you said, but your mentor, was
Valerie Collymore.
okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
No, I'm horrible with names, but I'm assuming she's fairly successful as an artist. Has she helped? Has she, aside from teaching you, has she helped you into the art world? Like, did she guide you into it in addition to teaching you how to, or helping you learn how to paint?
Yeah, absolutely. In the beginning of it, she took me to a bunch of. That's one of the things that I think the Atelier really has to its benefits, is that the classroom is not the only place to go, and it's feasible to take one person, two people somewhere, to anywhere pretty much. You don't have the I have 10 people following me, I can't take a class into a small gallery kind of a problem. So she took me to small galleries and would show me, these are people you should know, introduce them to me and introduce me to them, make me write down their names afterwards, and write down as much as I could remember, kind of, take notes on our interactions and make sure I remember the connections from one to the other, and kind of get a feel for each gallery and how it worked, who was running it and why, because it makes a difference. If they're just in it for the money, then they don't give a shit about your work at all, and it's very clear. If they care about only the art, then they're not going to care about whether you get paid. So there's kind of a nice balance you got to find in the middle there. That I don't know. There was a lot of things like that she took me through in the beginning that were really important. She also showed me through kind of the charitable museum side of things that I didn't really go into myself too much, but I didn't fit as well into it comfortably. I wasn't comfortable in the environment enough to really feel like I could push forward in it. So I let that one go. But there is that whole other side where there's, charity auctions and collectors who go to those and buy from there. And she introduced me to a lot of those same people who were a possibility for a way that I could go with a traditional career. And then she ended up introducing me to the gallery owners of the gallery that I am now represented by. So, and helped me kind of get in the door with them a little bit, or showed me how to get myself in the door rather. Yeah.
So I want to linger on this with one more question, because it ties directly into the first sort of preloaded questions that we had. And this idea of artists that want to be artists, that want to do something with it other than, a hobby, and they're looking into this curtain of the pale between them and this world that seems kind of inaccessible to a lot of people, and they're trying to think, well, how do I get in there, and where does my training begin? Would an atelier kind of situation be something that you would recommend, or are there times, when maybe a more I don't know if you want to say traditional, or more commonly thought of art school would be the way to go? Who would go in which direction and for what reason?
I think I would recommend a combination always. There was definitely benefit to the art school style of learning. There is a lot of information that's just spewed out at you, and in some ways it's hard to take it all in and make use of it. So I found that while my decision was based on me not being able to afford another semester, it ended up being really helpful for me to take the next 6 months and go, okay, I don't have more tools yet. I can't afford more tools yet, but these are the ones that I got from that time there. What can I do with them? What can I how far can I push with what I've got? Let me understand all of these things the best that I can. Like, at least that much can help me to further from there, and kind of taking these stopgaps that like, basically I allowed for that, the helix of learning and I think you think you know what I mean. That image that it's like the helix of knowledge to understanding and progression. Of like, as you learn more, you get better at a completely opposite and
Yep. Yeah. Definitely
pace
know that.
to each other. Yeah, that I think that made a huge difference in kind of allowing myself to do that. Where like I took the 6 months afterwards and was like, let me just study. Let me take what I've learned, push it forward, and then, change mediums, do it again. Change mediums, do it again. Go back to another basic, do it again, and then as soon as I could afford a new one, take that class and push forward with the next piece that I get until eventually I think the Atelier was the most useful for me, as once you've got kind of 101 down, the like basic color theory, basic, light shadow gradients, like you can work with form and shape a bit. Like, you don't need to be totally down the road to like second year art or anything like that. It just, you've got a grasp on some firm basics. Then an Atelier helped me to focus where I wanted to go with it. I think I didn't even have a medium of preference at the time when I started learning from Valerie. I think I'd tried oils for like a month beforehand. In like, I took one class that featured an oils section, and then I just didn't have the money to afford oils, so I moved on and stayed with acrylics for a while. But Valerie pushed me into oils and helped me find some connections to local companies that made it cheaper to afford them in the first place. And her one of her big focuses is in she was a doctor for years and years and years before a pediatrician specifically, up until she started practicing art, and then eventually working in the field. But she brings that like non-toxic focus really heavily to it, so there's very little to no solvent ever involved in any of her painting, which is strange for oils. There are no cadmiums, no leads, no anything like that. She basically uses 3 colors and a white, and mixes all of her colors from that, with a few high chroma additions occasionally when she needs something like a phthalo, or something you can't achieve with actual mixing, which I thought was much more affordable and a good entry point to be like, oh, I need 4 tubes. Oh, I need oil and 4 tubes? I can do that. I can't do 9 million tubes, all these solvents, all these different mediums, but I can do those like 6 things. So that made the bar to entry better too.
That's
which I think helps in an atelier setting.
Right. Yeah. That's one of my favorite things of all things, is when enigmatic, very esoteric things are distilled down into a couple of very easily digestible components that are very accessible, very affordable, very approachable to the uninitiated, and you can just immediately start working with it. And it blows my mind every time. That's like why it's so great. It's like people think about oils and they think about this like huge studio of like bizarre concoctions and tubes and vials, and right. Spencer is gesturing at his studio behind him. It's very compact. It's very well organized, and not casting aspersions on anybody that has the like crazy alchemist scientist wardrobe of a studio, but it's just nice to know like when things can be, you have that option of kind of like eliminating all of the I don't know what the term is. I don't want to say excess because that does sound derogatory, but like all of the extras, all of the peripherals, down to the essentials. What can I start? And I met your mentor once, and through natural conversation, it came up that I had tried oil painting for a while, and now I'm in this position where it didn't seem feasible because my son's room is just a couple of feet away. All of the solvents, all of the chemicals in the air, not wanting to do that. And she was like, "Oh, don't have to have any of that. Let me tell you about walnut oil." And it was just, oh my God, this is awesome.
That's how she got me, basically.
Yeah. So
it's funny because this also goes with my painting approach. I use walnut oil as a medium and nothing else. I only use solvents to clean my brushes at the very, very end, very briefly. But yeah, other than that, and I'm a very big proponent of doing limited palette, a lot of mixing. Never understood the point of having 20, 30 tubes of paint. What would I even do with them? I don't even know.
That's pretty much the philosophy she instilled in me from the beginning. I've branched a bit out, but I use walnut oil primarily with a little bit of Gamsol, which has become a choice of necessity over time because it speeds up drying time. So as I get closer to shows and openings, when deadlines come up and I need it to finish drying faster, because I'm behind, that's when I need the Gamsol a little more. But other than that, I'm much in the same route with I prefer the walnut oil. I don't really use anything other than that. I like to keep it very simple. I do get a little bit liberal with Gamsol, but it's also an odorless one, so it's one that
It is the safest of the mineral spirits. And if I can, just a real quick warning to everybody who wants to get into painting, try it for the first time. With oil painting, be aware that rags, if bunched up and thrown in the trash, can spontaneously combust. So look into that. There are options out there. I'm not going to get into it now, but just be aware that's a danger that's not spoken of all the time. And don't trust the AP on things that says that things aren't toxic entirely. I once got really sick from the fumes from acrylic medium that says AP supposed to be non-toxic, made me horribly sick. So, be careful with your materials.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got a laboratory trash can actually for my studio just for that purpose, because it's got the elevated base, so if a fire happens, it doesn't actually touch the ground and it will snuff itself out with a closed cap. But something like that is really important for a studio like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So someone in the chat is echoing one of my thoughts. Wait, what? When you mentioned things like acrylic mediums being potentially toxic and the AP, for those that may not know, can you describe what the AP is? And two, if it's telling you that it's not toxic, but that's not something that you can rely on, is there something that you can rely on? Is this just research necessary?
Yeah. So the AP is the on the bottles and tubes of paint. It'll say, I think it's CM and AP. AP is supposed to be non-toxic. It's a little designation. No, not Associated Press. Yeah, it's supposed to be non-toxic, and the fumes from it literally made me sick. I don't have a great sense of smell. My girlfriend could smell it immediately. So try and use, sensible precautions. If there's a strong smell, open up some ventilation and don't eat your paint. Is the motto of my channel. So yeah, I don't know what else to add to that in particular.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I did just check a few too, and they just don't even have it. I was gonna be like, "This is the logo," and then I checked them, and they're not even trying. They're just like, "Nope, this is gonna kill you."
Yeah, no, this was for an acrylic matte medium that I was using to prime paper or something, instead of basically instead of gesso. That's what I was using it for, because I do oil painting as well, but you can use it as a base. But yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
yeah, that's
there have been some links that posted in chat for more information on this, and I copy pasted that, and that will be included in the show notes too. So more information will be available on the recordings. But let's swing back to your entry into professional life.
oh yeah.
Because I want to get back to this idea of the like great mystery of fine art
Yeah.
and the gallery world. We've probably all seen the meme, where it's like, for any given subject, step 1, start painting. In this example, it would be start painting. Step 2, keep painting. Step 3, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 4, profit. So talk to me about step 3, because there's this big empty spot for a lot of people between being a painter and being a successful artist. And you've talked a little bit about your experience, with your mentor and in the atelier setting and that kind of like introducing you into things. But then like going into it, did you have the conception of being like a professional working fine artist going into it? Or is that something that you discovered along the way?
I think initially I was just like I was still working as a pizza delivery driver to make the bills, and studying. And when I booked my first show, I thought of it as like, this is awesome. I would love to be able to supplement my income with some art sales, but I didn't really see it initially as a job. Just basically because I don't know. I hadn't felt like I was putting enough time into it at the time. I felt like I was putting so much time into my day job that it didn't feel like it was a job yet. And so there was kind of this weird magic moment where I had to take a week off from work to finish the paintings for the gallery show. And I realized that I was now spending more time painting than I was delivering pizzas. And so it kind of had this immediate transition to like, okay, I'm putting my hours in. Is this doable? Like, can I make a go of this? What does this mean? Like, where does this go? So I went to Valerie and I was like, what do we, I know I'm showing my work, but how do I make this viable? And so she started talking to me about the fact that like, you can't have one stream of income. It's just that's not a thing. You can't just be like, I'm going to get into a gallery, people will buy my paintings from the gallery, and I'll be good forever. That's not a thing. That may be a thing way down the road when you're way bigger and you've got, a huge price tag on every painting. But you have to get there first, if you even get there. And the whole way along the road, you got to fund it or you won't make it. So you got to do something other than just paint things, because you're also going to get better as you go. And so there are going to be, the painting you did the first year you were showing in a gallery is going to be embarrassing at the last show. So, I had to take that as it was and be like, all right, what can I do that is a useful skill that is part of this world that will be a paying thing? So I had a variety of options, basically. Like I worked with photography for years, so I'm good with cameras. A lot of different things require cameras on the way to paintings or from paintings to sales, like photographing other people's artwork and creating, their web images for their online portfolios, for the gallery's catalog, for, all of those different things. Framing other people's paintings for this purpose, framing for the gallery so that you can do all of those, like assistant work for galleries that, whether you're in them or not, are really good jobs for it. Like, in the same way as in any other industry, you get a job in the field that you want to work in, regardless of if it's a shit job. Like, you want to work in music, go get a record store job, even if you are not gonna, not gonna end up being a record store clerk. Like, that's your first one. You want to work in the field where things matter. You got to keep on the pulse of it at the same time, because it literally just puts you in the right place all the time. So I did a lot of that. A lot of odd jobs, a lot of like, you're having a show? Do you need a wine passer outer, man? I have a suit. Like, little things like that. That's all, it's just little stuff, but like, then the gallery owners start to know you as well. So you start to be a recognizable face. When, while I didn't attend Gage specifically, Gage invited me to be an assistant and then a teacher, because I kept going to people and helping out with things. I showed, I went and cleaned brushes for a ton of different artists, and then for classes after that. And so like, if you need brushes cleaned, I'm good at it, and I can do it quick. I can do it on the spot, and I'll bring my own materials. I also will not work with extreme solvents. So if you do, like liquid, call someone else. That kind of a thing is it's a good business like reputation to have out there for me, and it helped me to find things in the field that allowed me to continue to work while I'm getting paid for like small things that I'm kind of already going to do. Like, when I was going to go do a brush cleaning job, I'd take mine. And, I only have 5 brushes to clean. They have 40, but like, I'm going to clean them at the end too. I'm not going to waste the soap that is already activated. It's, it's one of those kind of things where the material's live, why not do it? And I'm not going to charge them for the time I'm doing mine, but like, at the same time, like, I'm not going to leave it at home and wait till later. Then I kind of work all of my tasks into the business. You know what I mean? Like, I pair it with other things I'm already doing. And same with framing. I'd find artists who are going to be doing a show in the same month as me, and then we all order frames together. I get them all delivered for all of us, and then they bring me their paintings. I put them in the frames. Makes it easy for everybody.
This is
I wasn't
really
aware
fascinating.
that brush cleaning was something you could get paid for.
I mean, I don't know how many people are in the brush cleaning game, frankly. I think I might have been like a weird entrepreneur of this one.
Good on you.
Well, like you were
most people
saying,
just,
it's a thing. It's one of many things that you were doing. So that's
exactly. So yeah, it was kind of just like finding all of the odd jobs for things people need done that they wouldn't otherwise think to hire somebody for, and just being like, I can do that. Like, you need to build this thing, or you have a giant sculpture that you're having trouble working with because it's flat on the ground all the time, and you want to just be able to spin the damn thing around so that you can like look at it in the same angled light, but have this, from the statue from a different angle, but and so I'll build a platform, fuck it. I got a drill and some hammers and things like that. I can put together a platform on wheels that you can spin around and move your ridiculously large sculpture so that you can see it from the same light source no matter what. Like, it's a ton of random things, but like, I kind of just I stumbled into a lot of them, basically, where I just started putting the word out with people. First it was my mentor. She was the first one who was like, I have 250 brushes from all my classes. Would you clean these and I'll pay you for it? And then I was like, this is the thing. I can do this. And so then I offered it to another artist who had a similar problem, and word of mouth from there.
I'm curious because every place is so different. Is it a very like geographically small community, artist community where you are? Like, is it that everyone's close by or share studio space in bigger building or something like that you were able to kind of like drift through these different options?
A little bit. My mentor works out of her home studio. I kind of just found meeting places is how I thought of it. It's like there are a bunch of places that rent studio space in Seattle. I'm sure Joby knows a few. That like in downtown especially, there are a bunch of those like old beat up buildings that they've turned every single square inch into a different studio. And I showed at a gallery in Magnuson Park that is part of it's the Space Gallery, I think. Like all capitals, acronym style. And they mostly run studios out of that building and rent them to people. So finding places like that where artists end up having to go is what I ended up finding to be the most useful. Like Artists and Craftsmen in Seattle here too is an art store. They rent their back room as a teaching space for a lot of people. So I'd go there and rent the space and do the same thing, and then just hang out at some of them. Like just be a fly on the wall. As much as like it helps to know people, it also helps to just kind of get your foot in the door and make your way into knowing people. Like there's a whole lot of just being social and just like putting yourself out there is a huge part of it, like unabashedly.
Yeah, that sort of speaks to one of the questions that Mandala brought up in the chat is how did you reach out and get those clients for those service jobs to get involved in the industry? Yeah, so yeah, you were kind of speaking about that a little bit. I don't know if there was some more advice that you had. I would, if possible, I would like to connect that question to one that I had, which is, are there other things that you would like new artists that are coming into this, things that you would like them to know going in?
I wrote a few things down actually on that one.
Excellent.
I mentioned many income streams that like a gallery is not going to be the end all be all. Even if you get into one and are showing regularly and selling paintings there rather quickly, it's not going to be a like you got to live in a really shitty place for that to make your ends meet. And so, you know, that's a big part of it. The other thing is like trying everything. Just fucking do everything. Like we study a lot as artists, and we read a lot, and we look at a lot. We're professional observers after a fashion in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I think in traditional art school and in self-teaching I didn't get as much of, and that I think the Atelier may have pushed me a little harder with, was having somebody who is just kind of standing there, only able to watch you, and if you don't do anything, it's boring as shit for both of you. So they just want to shake you to make you do something sometimes, just to like, yeah, we gotta move. We can't just sit here anymore. And like, it makes you just try stuff. It, you know, that's something that like she gave me a challenge that I'm gonna try and do for everybody else soon too. That was a butter knife challenge. Like halfway through my Atelier learning, she saw me painting one day and was like, I'd picked up some ratty brush that was just destroyed because I'd forgotten mine, and she was like, what is happening right now? I could just give you a stick or a butter knife and you could still paint with that. And then immediately it became like no longer a joke, but now a challenge. Like, let's see if I can. Let's see what happens, what I learn from using like a thing that's not for painting. And so that, you know, that taught me a lot of things too, just like breaking outside the box and like doing things, learning from experience is a huge part of it. That like I tried things I never would have thought to try that were part of, you know, a curriculum I learned years ago that I'd never really thought to put into effect, or like even thought of how to put into effect until I was holding a butter knife and I didn't really have any other options, you know?
Yeah, a mutual friend of ours that has been on the podcast before, Pink Eye Epoxy. been in her stream sometimes, and she's painting with a stick or a straw, or like, okay, what have I seen in a cigarette butt? What did I see in the street today that I can pick up and start using to paint with?
Yeah.
So there's lots of kind of different ideas about. Oh, sorry. Before I jump ahead, you said that you had written some things down. Were there some other things that you had on that list?
I think that was the list. I think, that it was mostly the like making sure that you keep in mind that you're not going to be able to just do. So like you can't just paint all the time and sell the paintings. It's not going to be the end of it. It's you got to leave time for like a whole business side of it, for marketing yourself, for teaching, or something else that's going to make money. And then that like doing things is key.
Yeah, I was actually super fascinated to hear you talk about that, because it really reminds me a lot of the tattoo industry, actually, where people are asking me all the time, like, well, how do you become a tattoo artist? Like, how do you break into an industry that doesn't have a school that you can go to? Never mind things that call themselves tattoo schools, because that's not actually a real thing. But I always say the same thing. It's like, well, get to know tattoo artists, get tattooed, figure out ways to make yourself useful. That's like 95% of the way that everybody gets into the industry. And it seems very similar to what you were just describing. The thing is that like people have this not a notion, but lots of different ideas about what the gallery world actually looks like, and what it means to be a successful artist. And I put success in scare quotes, as it should be. And maybe there's this idea that you're either nobody, or you somehow like grease the right palms or meet the right people or whatever, and then you become Picasso, like there doesn't seem like what you're describing a lot of like kind of in between. So is there a tiered structure? Are there mid ranges to the fine art world?
Absolutely. There are huge varieties of tiers, and like whole different tier systems that like halfway interact and overlap depending on region. Some of them are local, some of them are global. It kind of depends on how your market is, or what market you're targeting. That seems to be from what I've found, is the only real commonality between any of the tiers to each other. Is like, if you're targeting big money and like large collectors who will, bring scary, the kinds of money we think about when we see like, the auction houses and things like that is a specific set, and they have a very closed entry system. It is a long climb to get there, and they're very snooty. And it's kind of just how that works. Is like that's one subculture of how you could buy art, and I think that's the most traditionally thought of one, which is why I start with it. But I think the local ones seem to me to be the most viable, because basically there's no room for new artists to emerge in an old world market like that. You can't bring in new guys who are going to sell at the auction houses for $20,000. Nobody's heard of them yet. Their name doesn't mean anything, and that's all this market cares about. So they have to grow in another market in the first place. They need farm teams, basically. And that's what I think a lot of the local markets and the smaller global markets really are. And I display in a local gallery here. They get good press around the Northwest, and a lot of people recognize them here. When you get towards Oregon, they still have some recognition. By the time you make it down towards California, not even into California yet, nobody recognizes it anymore. And that's kind of just the way it works is there's a replacement for it in each area. Like neighborhood galleries feed downtown galleries feed larger cities downtown galleries, which feed eventually like name brand galleries that are much bigger and have only a few in select like LA, New York, big cities like that are scary. And that's when you make it to that higher tier of it, which you got to climb a long way to do. And there's a lot of us along that ladder, as it were. Like,
this is really refreshing to hear. Mainly because I mean, even I had this idea. Like I as many, you know, traditional or fine artists that I know, even me, I if you would have asked me, you know, how you break into the gallery world, my mind would immediately go to, I don't know if we've all seen the movie Basquiat, but there's a scene in the movie where it tells the apocryphal story of like how he met Andy Warhol, and he sees Warhol having lunch in a diner, and he just barges in and tries to sell Warhol little sketches, and Warhol is like, oh, I love these are so great, and then they like become lifelong friends. And so like even like knowing that that's like probably embellished fiction, I would still have this idea that like that's how you would make it big anyway, is like you're in the right place at the right time and you meet fucking Andy Warhol, you know, and he likes your bar napkin sketch or whatever. But you're telling me that there's a grind. It's not easy, but there's a grind that you can do where you can advance. Let's not say, you know, I don't know what kind of peak people are reaching for, you know, but it's like, it's not like you're relegated to being like fucking nobody if you don't luck out.
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of people who have the luck stories that get famous like that, like Basquiat and Warhol, but I think a lot of them are really just small instances of slight help. It's kind of I liken it to the tubes, the secret tubes at the end of Mario levels, where you jump over the flag and go beyond it to the backside, and you can skip a couple of levels, and you don't really skip that much. It's only like one, maybe two, maybe a world maximum, but like you're not going to get that far ahead, but it'll give you a little leg up. That's the maximum you really get from something like meeting a huge, you know, growing talent and getting into there. And you don't really have the ability to just like walk up to a random one and be like, here are my things, make me a star. Like it doesn't, you don't really have that. There's no access to that. So it's not really a thing that happens beyond like, we're all in the grind together, so some of us will make it. And I think the reality of it is that Basquiat probably just went to the same restaurant that he always went to, and Warhol went to the same restaurant he always went to. They kind of knew each other from being in the same circles, and so he had the ability to actually go up to him and be like, hey, I don't know if you know me that well, but you might have heard of me. I just want your opinion on these. Like, I respect your work. Would you give me a critique? I imagine that to be how it actually went, and that they showmanized the rest of it into what we know. Because the reality is yes, you help your friends get up. Like, you know, yeah, I if I had an extra slot in a show, I'm going to look to a friend first to fill it. I'm not going to go, let me pick some random artist who I have never met before, who I'm going to have to go find and identify their work as something I like, and, you know, and then trust that they're going to be able to fill the show. Like we go to each other for reasons. Like, I can trust that if I go to a friend and I say, I have a slot in my show, it's a 2-person show, we each get half the gallery, I need you to fill the other half. It's on my name if you don't. I'm the one booking this show. Can you do that? And if they say yes and they can't, I'm fucked. I have to fill the artist with somebody else entirely. And they know that when they do that. So there's a like trusting your friends and knowing that somebody who does good work and can perform to a deadline like that makes a huge difference when it comes to that. So like that was the first show I got. Was my mentor was like, here, I need one person. I know you can do this. I know you can sell. I sold out that show. Like she was right that I could do it, and she believed in me, but she also like helped me to find my way to do it. Was like, I needed to get out there and market and find people who want to buy them and get them to the gallery, give them a reason to go. Like, I needed to have all the paintings done and do all of that at the same time. And like, knowing that I could do that was an important thing that she couldn't have known if I was just some random person. So there is a help that comes from knowing people, but you have to kind of know them on the way up, not once they're huge. Like, if I run into Jeremy Mann or, Jeremy Lipking on the street right now and tried to like, even if they have heard of me through some weird connection that we have to each other, he's not going to put me in a show because I didn't really come up with him and like learn with him and show him. I haven't shown him that I can do it. And that's really the big thing. So like, it's an important aspect of being social with other artists to show that, like, to show each other, like, we do work. We don't just sit around, and, and that's a big part of it. So
yeah, that wouldn't have made as good a movie though. So
no.
There's a question in the chat. Bankenheim asks, the notion of working without a parachute is almost universally lauded by artists and business owners. Quote, failure is not an option. As someone whom is both creator and entrepreneur, is there a safe option, or is risk necessary for reward, in your opinion?
I mean, yeah. I think risk and investment, both of time and like reinvestment of your own capital. Like, there was a long period there where I was just investing more money. I'd make money and it would not go into my bank account. It would go directly back to something that I wanted to further my career. Like, I for my second show, me and the other artists who were on the bill split the cost of an advertisement in an art dealer's magazine here in Seattle, the SADA, SADA, and that netted us a huge variety of collectors who would never have seen our work otherwise. But it was expensive as shit, and it it cost us a lot. It took a lot of time working with the magazine company, getting everything sized, and we did it all ourselves, so we didn't have somebody like making it fit and be the right proportions exactly with the DPI and file type that would work with their weird printing program, like that part of it was it's risky to throw yourself out there and be like, I'm going to invest in a huge advertising package that maybe nobody's going to see. I might spend months worth of rent on this ad and nothing will happen with it. But if I don't, then I'm never going to find out if I could have gotten more.
But it's not but that's not a complete gamble. Like, it's not like you don't know that people read the magazine or something. Like, it's not like you're like, I've never heard of this thing, but maybe, right? I mean, like, there's also some like common sense, like, analysis benefit to it. You know what I mean? I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question comes down to, like, with art, it's always the subjective nature of like, how good am I? How good is my work? How good do they think that my work is the real question, because they're the buyer or the potential buyer. And so it's whether I'm putting my best piece forward. It's, did I pick the wrong piece to put in that ad? Should I have put this one in? Was this a better, what would have played better? Like, there are different risks involved in it that are that make it feel like more of a cohesive risk beyond just the basic like putting it into the magazine. It's a little more of the nuances of it that become more risky. Like I can put a terrible piece that I should never have put into the ad in there, and no one will like it, and they will see it. So their eyes will definitely make it there. I knew that part of the marketing worked, but now they know that I'm shit, or they think that I'm terrible because of this one painting that was awful. Like that like there's a give and take to it in that same way. And like there's a similar risk with like investing your time in going and like volunteering at galleries like I did early on to get them to see my face so that they would recognize me when I eventually gave them a portfolio, which I never did right away. I think that's what I did forget for new artist advice. Don't open with a portfolio. Don't walk in and just hand them a portfolio and say, I'd like to show at your gallery. They have 5,000 people doing that every single day. It's ridiculous how much email they get like that. Make your face matter. Like help first.
Yeah, so kind of a theme that I hear between kind of what both you guys were saying is that there's a bigger context to this idea of risk. It's one thing that I would modify in the question that Bankenheim asked is this notion of working without a parachute, and certainly the idea that that's like lauded by artists and business. I don't know if lauded is so much the way to put it as what's the word, when you kind of like overhype something. Well, I guess
kind of put it on a pedestal.
Yeah, it's exaggerated or idealized in some kind of way. That there's this like crazy Rambo-esque quality to like going into the fray, and you like working without a parachute implies something much more catastrophic than what actually ever really happens in the real world, which is more of like the gradually upticking graph. And yeah, there's going to be like big dips down towards the bottom, but like an actual like type 1 catastrophic failure, what would that even look like in terms of a career? Like how badly do you have to fuck up to just write yourself out of like the history books entirely? That seems extreme, you know what I mean? So like any failure is kind of within this context of the overall picture that you're creating, which is a way longer game than any one step along the way. So I would say maybe think about it a little bit differently. It's not like yes, it is a risk. Yes, risk is necessary. Absolutely. But you can comfort yourself that if it does go to shit, as it often does, that's fine. It's okay. That's not the last opportunity you're going to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like Joby just said, there are much smaller falls. The safety net is, before you started trying to be an artist, you had a day job. You can keep a day job. A lot of artists do along the early part, especially. Like if you dip back down into it, that's not the hugest fall in the world. It's not safety net categorically, because it doesn't feel like you were in such a travesty. Like you weren't on a high like a tightrope act falling. You were just like a couple feet off the ground. You just like stubbed your toe and stumbled a little.
I always thought of it as like not so much a safety net as if you're going to fall, but it's more like not really getting off the ground, because if you have a day job, like a day job is a lot of times looked at differently than like a career. So if you're working and you're making, whatever, I don't know the amounts, but like a bit above minimum wage or something like that, and you can live off of that in your, 20s, but you don't want to be living off of that in your 50s, that type of thing. Like, I think that's the thing, but it's a long haul game for sure. Like, it's a marathon. It is not a sprint.
Absolutely.
At all. And also the thing and I don't know how you feel about this, and I'm projecting some of my feelings on it, but where I thought I would be at this age and what I thought I'd be focused on is so different than the reality of where my focus is and my interests are. It's wild, so there's a lot of turns along the route. At least for me, there have been.
No, absolutely. I think in the beginning, I thought I was going to be working in photography for, that's what I thought my medium would be. I use it as like a tool on the way to paint now at most, and it's it has nothing to do with that. I could never have seen myself in a gallery back in the beginning either. I would have thought like a different route was my way to go. Like it was it seemed like more I was going to be putting photos on the wire and like waiting for a magazine to pick them up, kind of a thing. Like it didn't feel like that direction. So I think there's a lot of like following the ride to see where it goes, finding your interests, and like there's a way to make it work with most of these. I think the biggest risk to me is not trying to do it and not like putting enough of yourself into it. It's like I have not found that any time I put time, effort, or like put myself out there on anything like this that it came to a bad end. It the only thing that happened was I shut up sometimes instead.
Yeah, and certainly if you have a family and a mortgage and like shit like that, the algorithm for your fucking risk parameters is gonna look a lot different. But that's kind of what you said, Leeahd. It's there's common sense involved. Don't go crazy. Don't lose yourself in it.
Yeah.
But also don't see it as like a all or nothing, and I'll never be able to do that because I gotta work this day job. There's always like space for small incremental grind as well. Yeah, it might take you a little bit longer, or it might be a little bit more difficult, but there's no one way or the other. I want to come back though to this idea of making it big, because we're talking about the upwards graph. We're talking about Andy Warhol and overnight sensations. Where is the graph going? I know that this is a very subjective question. You can answer it. Feel free to answer it just for yourself, or if you want to speculate on what you think of what you think other people might feel about it. Like in this world of galleries, fine art, traditional art, where is the graph going? Like, what does success look like?
Like, what's the top, or just like what does the success look like?
Yes. Understanding that there is no like peak to the graph. There's no like little guy standing at the top of the x-axis going, yeah, I made it. But there's something up there. There's something that you're pushing up towards.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's kind of like, there's people further along that graph and like, where are they and what does that look like for them at their point in it? Like, I don't know. For me, I'm thinking of Richard Schmidt. That's basically what I think of, is like, he just passed, but he's the greatest of all time, the oil painter to end all oil painters, in my opinion. And he's the epitome to me of what happens when you get to the end of a gallery rise, and you can go further from there. But like, I feel like he took it as far as during his lifetime was possible, if you know what I mean. So like, there's the next one will carry the torch further, but he carried it that far, if you get what I mean. And that's from teaching enough people to create another generation of artists was a huge influential part of his existence. Like, we don't have Casey Baugh, Jeremy Lipking, Jeremy Mann. We don't have any of these people if we don't have Richard Schmidt. Like, he's just like inspiring a huge number of people and reaching that level of people with what you're doing, finding ways to like to pass down kind of the collective knowledge of it. Because I think we don't really have a Library of Alexandria for art, as it were. Like, there's no compendium of how to mix all of our mediums and make this blend and do. There's pieces everywhere along the way, but there's no big book of it. So as much as we gather, I feel like he gathered a crazy amount of it, and I kind of aspire to do something similar, get a lot of knowledge and pass it to as many people as possible so that they have the tools to take it the next step. And like, I think, to me, that kind of lies outside of the gallery world and how I measure his success. Like, it doesn't seem to make any difference whether he's in a gallery, according to what I just said, pretty much. But I find that like that helped him to reach more people too, which, in a very real way, I think of galleries as the communal meeting spaces that we all have to go to, that I've been describing as like a good place to go and connect with other people and get more networking started.
Does that mean that you, aside from doing galleries, you teach and, do like the ateliers type of stuff, or that you just plan on doing that? I'm curious.
I had pre-COVID. I had been doing mostly workshops that they're basically 1 to 4 lesson packages is what I used to do, where I do one every week and you come in for a 3 to 6 hour. You can leave after 3 hours if you want. The rest of the time is painting time. But like those kind of workshops were a big part of it for me. That was my way to pass it down to people. And then I took a couple of private students, but I tried not to do. I didn't like group classes at the time. They were unwieldy for me. Just with my style of teaching, I find I get more information to a student by a one-on-one or a two-on-one. So I found that was best for me. Since COVID, it's been a little interesting. So we'll see. One of them wants to start back up and is set up to do it again through Zoom and etc. now. But workshops are kind of unfeasible in the same way, which is what I've been adapting. I can see Joby itching to segue.
No, not at all. I got distracted by someone mentioning in chat that I jacked up your Twitch link. So,
oops.
I'm gonna edit.
It's fine.
I'm gonna edit
Speaking of workshops
part out, but I just wanted to. Oh yeah.
There's an E after the S and an A after the L. Yeah, it's a spelling.
Okay, I'll fix that in a moment. But Leeahd, did you have a question?
I was just kind of a comment about the workshops. I took a workshop during COVID with a well-known artist, and I don't want to judge the artist too harshly as in general regarding what the workshop would be like, but this was his first Zoom workshop ever. And like I said, I really don't want to judge him too harshly, and I'm not going to mention his name, but it was less than satisfactory. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I had considered doing Zoom workshops, and then I kind of just thought it through and did like a weird practice session on my own, imagining what would happen, and I can see these issues. I can see how this would happen. It's there's so much that like just being able to be there makes such a difference that like I don't like the variety of cameras is like a basic technical issues. Like I do color mixing. That's one of my big workshops. So for me, that's a nearly impossible one. Is like, how am I going to teach you to mix colors when I can't see what you actually mixed? Because your camera looks different than mine, and from the next guy and the next guy, and like the whole class's cameras look different. So what did you all mix? Like, what is this? Yeah. What did I make?
It definitely, and then the screen calibration and on and on.
Exactly. So it's one of those where like I have found that technology makes it difficult to do something like that. Our eyes are our eyes, and as much as they vary a bit from person to person, they mostly see hues of light the same way, or wavelengths of light in the same way. And it's not the same when it comes out of a screen and through two forms of technology. So I didn't see a way to really adapt that for me personally. So at least to the live function, what I've been aiming for, that I'm scripting and working on filming, is instead a video version that'll be kind of like Skillshare style. Watch the video and then communicate with me. Send me pictures on your phone. It'll be phone corrected, which is pretty standardized, and I can probably at least figure that out based on, how phones work with each other. It's more uniform and standardized. So that at least can slightly bridge the gap. And then it also will be just one person in each file, which has made a difference from private lessons in the past, that even if they're using their cell phone, it's the same camera. So I get used to how their mixing looks, how their colors look on their camera, and that helps bridge the gap. But it's also just really unruly to try to gauge or to control a class with a Zoom call. Having, people talking over each other is impossible. And so, it ends up just being either me talking all on my own and having no feedback, with nobody really, I can't really tell who's engaged or not in the same way, where like, you can feel and see the different eyes on you when they're all in a circle in front of you, but you can't really do that in the same way when they're all boxes to focus on in a screen. It's harder to keep track of. So I find that I get why it would be hard to adapt. I think there's a different way that we could approach it that would be helpful. And that's what I'm, hoping to adapt for the future, because I missed that. It was fun.
Yeah, I remember late 2019, maybe around there somewhere, you were talking about some plans that you had for workshops, and if I'm remembering right, it was something along the lines of like during the Lavender Festival, like taking groups of people up to like do landscape paintings, and having like workshops and educational stuff. I mean, you want to talk about making it big? That sounds just awesome. Like if you can, be in that kind of setup, that sounds great. So along this idea of the upward momentum, pricing is something that comes up in my world, the freelance illustration world, all the time. It's probably the number one most misunderstood, maybe the most discussed question, or misdiscussed question. But I have this idea that just from a subjective standpoint, the idea of pricing is even harder in the gallery world. Is that accurate? Because it is more subjective. Like there isn't like the industry standard. There's no day rate. In the illustration world, you can find places where you're gonna get you're getting paid this much by the hour. What's the yeah, go ahead.
Yes and no. There's kind of a different. There's a lot of ways to think about it. In some ways, like I think when you phrased this to me, one of the caveats was is there pressure to undervalue and things like that in the prep questions. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is like the gallery world is a higher priced market. That's something that like is just kind of inherent to it. And as much as like it seems snooty to just be like, we have more money, it's just the reality of it is like that. When I talk about finding a market and like moving from one market to the next, this is one of the bigger, higher priced markets, and the people there expect it to have a higher price tag, which is kind of in two ways. That is that they're not as shocked by it, and they're more shocked if you do undervalue it. That is a red flag for them. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a real artist. I didn't know how to price this properly, so I put it too low. And now it seems like this might be the only thing I ever do of real quality that just was a fluke, and everything's going to stay at my standard pricing scale that's way too low, quote unquote, for this one piece, or this one collection, or whatever, whatever they're seeing, however many paintings they're seeing. That tendency to want to undervalue your work and price yourself lower is a really, really bad pitfall. There's kind of just an automatic in some ways with a lot of galleries, however, that keeps that somewhat at bay, is that the galleries kind of just know their market for the most part. They know who comes in and how much they're willing to pay for a thing of any size. They know who they have their own receipts. They know who's buying things, and so they can tell right away kind of if you're totally overshooting it, and they will warn you. Your gallery, at least if they're a good gallery, if they're just a shitty, gonna throw you to the wolves gallery, which there are a few, they won't. But most good ones that you'll end up ever wanting to be in will work with you and will tell you, this is what we think it should be valued at. This is, you tell them first what you think it should be valued at, and then you kind of meet yourself in the middle, however long it takes, however many rounds that takes. But it's helped in that way, which is why, in some ways, it's not harder to determine, because you have this helping hand of another interested party who's going, we need to make money off of this too. We're going to help you value it high enough to do that, for us as well as for you. And so, that helps. That's a huge benefit. But at the same time, there's the other side of it where it is extremely hard to know if you're pricing it right. There's no real metric for it beyond what people are willing to pay, because ultimately that's the end. That's the end result. Is if you price it too high, they aren't going to be willing to pay it. If you price it too low, it'll vanish in 5 seconds, and then it will also not be treated as valuable, so it'll get lost in 5 seconds. They might buy your painting, but it'll end up in a drawer, or
I'm curious. I've heard people having an experience with the art galleries where they basically, the art gallery knows that they can sell, they have some collectors and they can sell a certain amount, but outside of those collectors, you're basically I don't want to say overpriced, but you're pricing yourself out of sales because no one else can buy it. I don't know if you've seen that or experienced that. I'm just curious.
I have seen it a little bit. I think it's more common at the next tier above me. I'm a neighborhood gallery. Downtown galleries are really common for that. It is often basically you came from one tier, you're moving to the next. Are you ready for it? We're going to try and price you up to that. When you fall short and you don't have people who are willing to invest that much in your paintings, it does send you back down to neighborhood gallery. And I have not done that downward yet. I have not done the upward to get to that challenge yet. But that's also a higher price tag than I'm currently working with, which is where it just starts to matter more, even more. When the painting is 1,000, it's one thing. When it becomes 5,000, it's another. And that jump makes it does feel like a strange caste system, Mandala.
Yeah, it's interesting that Mandala used that phrase, because I actually had that.
You did use the same phrasing
in the questions. Yeah. We can come back to that though. I don't want to cut you off if you had more on that thought.
No, yeah. I think, one of the, I think it just comes down to like it. Once you go to a higher level of market, you can't just expect the same people who were paying at the previous market value to just jump up with you. They didn't get richer. You need to find richer people who are still interested in it. And like, that sounds fucked up, but it's just the reality of it is like, when you want to sell it for more, you need to find people who can afford to pay that more. And it's the same thing with any market is like, it's only so deep. You can only dip the same pool so many times before it's empty. And some pools are deeper than others. So like, that's where like more income streams, more variety. Like I know a bunch of artists who do a variety of types of subject matter for different tiers of galleries. Like their portrait work is only in neighborhood galleries, but their landscapes and cityscapes are in downtown galleries, and they're in magazines for that, but nobody knows they even do portrait work. And then you stumble in it in a neighborhood gallery because they've been doing those since they were starting out, and a bunch of the people for that market group who want to buy those portraits don't have the money to afford the landscapes and cityscapes. So he just keeps selling them at the same prices, roughly. He's upped it a little bit each year, but like it's like $100 each year per painting, basically. So it's not gone up and not even every year, like every 1 or 2 maybe years. I think it's gone up 300 per painting total in the time I've been tracking him. But yeah, like that kind of a thing where you raise it a little bit, but you're still dealing with the same market. So you're going, I'm getting better, so it's worth more, but you guys pay this much for it. It's not going to change. I'm not going to suddenly charge you 3 times as much for the same thing, because they're the same people. They're going to be weirded out when you just go, yeah, it's worth more now. I'm better. I'm cooler. Like it doesn't. It feels weird, and so I think a huge part of it is about feeling to the customer on that one, and how it, we're playing an emotional game in a lot of ways, and this is tugging on their heartstrings with art. So we can't be surprised when that's a part of how they react to buying it too. It's I don't know. I think that's a cohesive part of it to me.
So with this idea of tiers, is there a weird political shenanigan aspect to this world? I mean, if so, can you describe what can one realistically expect in that regard?
By politics, you mean like an internal politics or relating to the world politics? Kind of, because a little bit of both.
Yeah, column A, column B. This idea of a caste system, where it's like,
yeah,
oh, you're in the neighborhood galleries. No, thank you.
Yes.
And like trying to get into that, there can be a little bit of sacrificing pieces of your soul. I'm not saying that's what it is. This is total hyperbole. I'm wondering what your take on it is.
I believe I wrote absolutely to the sacrificing your soul part. It was, it definitely feels like that. It's because there's parts of it where, some of the galleries are exactly that. And then some of them are nice and also a downtown gallery. So there is a variety to both. But like, I definitely see what feels like a caste system that like, if you're in a neighborhood gallery, you can step up to a city gallery, like in downtown, but you are not going to be you're going to be laughed out the door at an international gallery. Like they won't even, you can't skip that level. You got to go through each of the phases. And it very much feels like being a freshman in a new high school every time you go to a new tier. Like, oh, they're all so tall and I'm so tiny. What happened? Like that feeling is real, and you do kind of have to deal with like being the new kid a bunch. You're going to go through different tiers, and it's like it is different markets, it is different people who want different things, and like And I mean, and that part of it is that you're going to be better by the end, just because time happens, and there's nobody who's starting out at like 19 years old already doing international galleries and touring the world and giving. Actually, there's one lady, but that's Richard Schmidt's fault. Um, um, she was like 16 when she started, though, so at least she's got like 5 years on the trail before she started doing that. And so like there's nobody who's really doing that, and it's not really a path beyond, the imagination. We really do have, we have different people we're going to sell stuff to. You can kind of find a market sometimes that is just higher priced and break your way into it because of your subject matter too, which is totally unpredictable sometimes. Like I've got a friend who used to work at the place I take my paintings to sometimes for like full museum level digital quality photos of them, and she used to work as one of their editors. She stumbled into a niche part of making these fantasy creatures on laser cut canvases, and nobody had ever done them before. San Francisco went nuts for it, and so she, now she's doing 3 shows a year, and they're sending her to Iceland and all over the world just to like do stuff. She found her way into that market accidentally by just painting something that was, just exactly the right niche for a good market that could afford to pay for it. And it produced like a lot of her work featured like bugs and butterflies and things like that, where she could take a print of that and make them into a 3D version similarly. Like her laser cut canvases make it feel more visceral, and so she'd make laser cut 3D like realistic looking butterflies that were the same patterns as the ones in her paintings, and had the brushstroke accentuations on each print to give it actual depth, and sold those in packs of 10, and like that was an extra side thing for her that brought a bunch of people with interest in like fairies and butterflies and kind of a huge variety of like of subjects all together into one. So sometimes you stumble on something, but I think for the most part it's a grind through one after the next and looking for for a good opportunity.
So speaking of selling your soul, in that system, the like super mega top, we're going to call it top tier, like the most money, the auction houses that are selling things at like, the things that make it onto newspapers and in articles about like the ridiculous sales where, some of those, I mean, this is known that there's like a warehouse, I forget what country it's in, but literally they basically move paintings from one room to a different room and then you own it. Like these people never even see the paintings. So like talk about selling your soul, like literally keeping paintings away from people, which is just, awful. But like, is there a tier where you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to get into that area because I don't want to even approach that, kind of thing? Like, is there a level that you're aware of?
From what I understand, most of the paintings that are traded like that are of deceased artists, which is unfortunately simply due to the value that when you die, your work is worth an insane amount more. Like a case in point, the value of Richard Schmidt's work just quadrupled instantly, like the day after he died. So that is mostly the case, which to me feels like they have captured the escaping soul of a dying artist and put it in a bottle and now in a vault, and then they keep moving it from room to room to like give it a different scenery. And that feels equally ridiculous, but I think for the most part you don't really get to that level unless you're dead. It's not traded like that, at least. If you're alive and it's sold in that fashion, you kind of have more control. A lot of the big name artists that do things like that don't really, they don't have to deal with a lot of that shit. They just have to paint it. That like once you get past a certain point, your name carries itself, and you no longer have to lower yourself to it. Which like sometimes I see artists go through that phase where they realize that like they've been putting on airs and making this big show for people they fucking hate. Like for so long because they didn't want to be in that market or they didn't want to deal with this particular group of people, and then all of a sudden they realize like, oh, I don't have to do this. My name carries itself. People know who I am. My work has worth, and there are people who do want to buy my work, and they can now go to a gallery and be like, hi, I'm insert name here, and they just go, oh, hi, and then they get stammery and offer you a show if they can get it out. Like that's kind of, it's a real thing that happens now, because once you get to a certain level, the gallery knows they can make money off of you, because to them they're in business, and they know that like you've proven, just like when I offer a show to a friend and I know that he's going to be able to make the quota and sell some of his paintings, and he's going to perform or he or she is going to actually be able to perform, the gallery knows that these big artists are going to be able to really perform. They have like a good price guesstimate on how much they're going to make off of whatever size collection they get put in there. If it's 20 paintings, they know how much that is. And that makes it so that you can really just say no to galleries if you want. And that's the goal. But it's a very high climb to get there, and I think there's a similar level of respect at each tier. So like while the big name guys get to do that at auction houses and don't have to ever fear that their stuff is going to end up in somebody's vault until after they're dead, at least, like I don't have to worry that I'm going to have the same thing happen even if I get to the top of the neighborhood one, where people will recognize me and they'll let me into any neighborhood gallery. If I get to the downtown one similarly, and they'll let me into any downtown gallery, I'm not really going to have to deal with like, there's a level of respect to that like they're not going to push that on me. That's not going to be a decision I'm going to be forced to make. Like, no, I don't want these people buying my paintings. It becomes removed from you having to interact a whole lot with all of them at a certain point, and then you also just kind of, you find the market that makes sense for you anyway. So like people who want to buy my paintings have an interest in basically things that I do for the most part, until you get big enough that your name brings people in who don't care. You know, so like you only fear that once you get to a big enough point that you're a commodity and not just an artist, or not just creating work, which I hope I find some kind of success, but not necessarily at that type. I don't necessarily want to have to feel like I'm, a commodity.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you would like to think that you would see it coming and that you would know. You're like, oh, that'll never happen to me because I have principles or I have self-awareness or whatever. But those kinds of things can get real slippery. But that's...
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, personally, and this is maybe going to touch on a subject that we're going to talk about later, possibly, but I would hope that the people who buy my paintings personally buy them because they love them and want them, not because they're like, oh, this will be a good investment for later.
And that's what I hope for as well. That's what I always want for people buying my work. and that's kind of where, like, you know, that's what kind of incentivizes me to not want to get too big, basically. Like, at a certain point, I don't know if you basically price all the people out who do have that want, and that kind of sucks. So, you know, I just don't want to, I don't really have that desire to push to that level, at least in the short term. You know, I'm not really looking to do that right now. I'd like to share the information more and be more about, like, spreading art than just putting out a bunch of paintings that become valuable in a vault someday.
And let's be real. It's probably a lot harder to do those, you know, relaxing lavender field workshops if you're Richard Schmidt. There's probably a trade-off there. Like, your social capital becomes so tremendously heavy at that point that it's hard to just, like, relax around people. You've achieved celebrity status, and that's probably the one thing that celebrities complain about most, is it's just like, who the fuck am I if everybody that I'm around is looking at me as this weird persona of me that is not actually who I am? That could get really weird.
That seems to be kind of a big fear for a lot of people in that, and I totally get that. It's I don't know, it's terrifying. It seems like once you get in past the initial fear, there are a bunch of artists who have shown that, like, they hung out with him and spent tons of time with him, but like Daniel Keyes basically lived next door for years and years, pretty much. He's just, like, in every photo of Richard Schmidt. And but at the same time, like, he wasn't at first. He was just that guy, that mousy dude in the background of one of the workshops that, you know, you kind of could see. And I get that, like, there's a wall there. I don't know exactly how to break past it, but I could see how, like, that would be a problem, and I don't really desire that personally.
Well, using the lavender fields as another segue, back to the COVID, or coming back again, returning. I don't even know what the hell I'm trying to say.
Revisiting,
COVID,
maybe.
Revisiting, yeah.
COVID came up earlier, and how it had affected your ideas and forward momentum and plans for the future. Obviously, the gallery spaces are crossed off the list. Is there a sense for you of that coming back sometime in the near future?
I'm not entirely sure, because, I mean, my gallery's still open and they are still hosting shows. They still represent me, but it is not going well in the world of galleries in general. I mean, shows are just different. I think what galleries used to market was a social experience where you come in and you see all of the paintings up on the wall in the perfect lighting, where it's all been set up for you. They hand out wine and crackers and cheese and stuff, and you all mix and mingle and talk art. And that experience is something that's missing from the market of galleries and selling art through them now, which has hit it really hard, because now you are 6 feet away from everybody. You're all wearing masks, and there's no like finger food or like passing out drinks. That's not a thing anymore. That just invites people to take their masks off. Nope. So yeah, it's not happening right now in the same way, which makes it really hard to talk to people about your work, which is kind of the biggest part of an opening. Is like, I put all my paintings up and then I go around the room and I answer all the questions that people have about, like, why did you do this painting? Tell me about it. Tell me a story. Like, all of those, inquiries are the parts that, like, that's what people, when they're falling in love with a painting, want to know. And they can't ask in the same way. It's not the same interaction, and that's something that I'm having trouble replicating for those people, at least, because what they want is a very personal in-person interaction. That has been rough.
Oh.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, there's always a slight delay sometimes with the online stuff. Have you done any Zoom gallery openings type of thing? Because I literally did one last night, and I'm curious what your experience, if you've done that at all.
I haven't been asked to do it yet. My gallery just started doing them 2 shows ago now. They've been kind of their whole schedule. They closed for so long that their roster went and the queue is completely backlogged. So I'm gonna be as part of the next wave of bookings, but they're not even done with the stuff they'd already booked and written contracts for. So I haven't had a chance to participate in one and show during one yet. But I did look at one of them, the first one that they did, and watch as it was happening. It does a good job of showing the painting, but each gallery seems to be doing such a different approach to talking about it, and everything but just showing the work is so different from gallery to gallery that I'm not sure how to be like blanket statementy about whether they're working or not. Like, some of them are working great, others are just travesties, and it's kind of hard to show like any consistency to it yet, because I feel like they're all just still getting how to do this, and it's still too new to all of them. So there's no good strategy yet for anyone that's become the norm, at least. So I think they could be great. They could be a great way to do this. I think basically like the tech we use here on Twitch is probably going to be really handy. Like, lapel mics and using Wi-Fi with a mobile camera that you can walk around with. That'd be a really good idea. Running a live stream that you could have roaming with like the artist actually talking, instead of just like, just wandering around talking to myself, or, doing a couple of slow pan videos and doing a voiceover. Like, a couple of the different versions I've seen are just they're not engaging enough. There's not enough interaction. And that's a big component that I want to see brought back.
It seems like VR would be a place to bring this. Like, though maybe I'm being naive. I'm sure somebody that knows more about this world would be able to slap this down if I am. But yeah, like virtual reality spaces, where you have like really fucking nice high resolution images and scans of the artwork in a gallery setting, where, I mean, I do understand that requires the ability for everybody else to be on board with this, but it's like maybe there could be some like hybrid kind of thing, where like, so if you got the VR headset, you can do that, but if you're, maybe there's some other interface in a more traditional desktop kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the resistance to technology is going to be an interesting thing, because as much as it sucks, people with more money are older for the most part, because they've been on the planet longer and had time to accrue more money. It's just a fact of existence. Yeah. So they also don't like tech as much, at least, or not as quick to adopt it. And that is a tough bar, that like people who are not comfortable with new technologies and that take a lot of time getting used to them are not as quick to jump on board with VR and things like it, that are so new and so complicated to them that like it's a different bar to entry to them, and I think that's the issue that I have seen. Also, like Tutu mentioned, also like you have to have tech that works for it well enough, and like, if you're of the older generation, you are probably using your 9-year-old monitor, like you just said, and not upgrading it to a new one when a new resolution comes out, or when you want a faster one, or you're not changing your tech to update to the times, because you've had more time to accrue these long-lasting objects that are now old. And,
yeah, sure. I guess I'm just thinking of like new spaces, like places where like new things can start happening that aren't necessarily reliant, even whatever barriers of entry there had been to that sort of like old way of doing things, creating a new space that, yes, will have barriers of entry in themselves, but that it's new. It's something new. But without dwelling too much on hypotheticals and long game stuff, more short term, what's your forward projection look like? What kind of things are you doing to pivot and compensate?
I am shifting everything in my world, basically. I'm shifting my workshops to videos. I'm shifting my lessons to private online. I have shifted all of my like odd jobs to basically nothing, because nobody wants to have me come into their home anymore and clean their brushes, or into their studios, because there's nobody in person anymore. But I'm mostly focusing on like the framing side of things for that kind of thing, and like little jobs like that are how I'm adapting that one. And mostly I'm trying to bring my collectors into like, I'm not treating it as much as a barrier to entry for them, but more like they're resistant. Let's coax them into the web world. Let's bring them in, because I feel like it has a domino effect too, where like they know each other. So if I teach one, he teaches another. It's teach a man to fish, and now he can teach another to fish, and now we have a whole bunch of fishermen. And that's what I'm hoping for, is that I'm trying to get my clients one by one more used to at least one piece of the tech that is necessary to do it digitally now. And it's a slow, very one-on-one interaction with each of them. And then our other subject that we've talked about is I'm looking into NFTs right now, I'm still skeptical and kind of like half educated on it. So I'm still very much researching and trying to get into it.
Well, you fucked yourself now, dude. You've been canceled.
I've been canceled.
It just came up on Twitter right now.
Oh no.
ASAP Fine Art canceled. I don't think that you have access to the internet anymore. Sorry.
No, I'm ruined.
This is the
they
only.
Cut me off.
These are your last words, man. Make it count.
These are my last words. Oh no. Oh no.
Since you opened the can of worms, let's just do it. Let's go right into it.
I know this one's
NFTs.
It's a barrel of monkeys in here.
Yeah.
I knew it was coming.
So
yeah,
we're gonna skip over some things. We're gonna assume a lot on the part of the viewer as far as like what they do or don't know about NFTs, and with due respect, we're gonna kind of like ignore for the time being what they may feel about NFTs, because I'm curious to know how NFTs and traditional art come together. It's hard enough for some people to wrap their heads around NFTs, but there's at least this like one-to-one when it comes to pairing it with digital art, that it's all digital. When it comes to traditional artwork, how does that work? What's happening
there? It is weird, and I'm trying to keep up with it. There have been a bunch of people trying it. I've seen a bunch of people dip their toe in the water and then immediately delete all trace of them ever dipping their toe in that lake and just running screaming for the hills. I've also seen a couple of people just get real quiet and not talk about anything they're doing ever again. And I think, that's kind of the, like, some people are making a success out of it and some people are not. And it's very wild and all over the place because they're all taking different strategies. The most successful one I've seen so far is one that, what is his name? Serge Marshennikov, a Russian dude, has been doing. He's a really big artist and, almost auction house, more like New York gallery level. And he started doing NFTs recently. He's been getting huge amounts of pushback, despite the fact that it is working for him. He started out by selling one copy of each painting in a digital format, in addition to the original being sold separately. And people took badly to that, as they were seeing both for sale at the same time. So he shifted it to doing 100 of them, and if you buy one of them, then you can buy the original, but you have to buy a digital NFT in order to buy the actual painting. It was a ticket, basically, to the raffle, as it were, but or to the auction, which worked fairly well and didn't seem to make as many people angry, because it felt more like a token and less like they were trading the painting, which was what a lot of the blue chip collectors got real salty about. And in general, they're just not happy about this. Blue chip collectors don't like this. So, the big boys are not enjoying it as far as big money goes. But it seems like his latest way of doing it is the best way he's found so far, which is he takes he stumbled into this one. Actually, there was a painting that he lost in the mail. Someone stole it by mail theft. Basically, they ordered it and then they charged back, and it had already gotten mailed to them. So once it arrived, they just kept it. He had a digital image of it, but he'd never gotten, he'd basically had it stolen. So he put the NFT up and was like, this is a stolen piece of artwork. This is the only legitimate copy that exists. The original is an illegitimate copy. So who wants to buy this? And that got his collectors to pay attention to it and go, oh, there's a thing for this. This is a real idea. This isn't just playing with photocopies. This could be a real thing. And now he's doing if you buy the NFT, you can buy the original. That's the only way you can buy the original, is you have to buy the NFT too. So he's basically putting himself on the line to make NFTs real in a lot of ways now, which I think is interesting. But yeah.
Oh, sorry. So sorry.
No, yeah, that's all good. That was about all I had.
No, that idea
approach,
of doing a raffle, personally, like if he raffled it off, I would be totally cool with that. But having to buy the NFT to have to buy the painting in an auction, I actually personally wouldn't be down for that. But I probably also can't afford his painting, so that's probably not an issue.
Yeah, because I think part of what he was going with is he was marketing the exclusivity of his paintings anyway. That if you're already selling at an exclusive high class gallery, the people coming in feel that exclusivity. They feel like they're not going to run into to anybody who they don't really want to talk to. They're going to run into more akin to them, basically, and that I'm amongst my peers kind of feeling is part of what makes it successful. I think is that they have enough money to be like, yeah, I'll buy the ticket. It's just the auction. It's not going to be the most expensive ticket either. I don't remember what they were for, but it was like $100 or something like that. It wasn't for those people. That's a nice dinner, and that's kind of where they went with it. Is this is going to be an experience. I think
Sorry, that story that you told about the thief ending up with the fake painting because he said no, that's now illegitimate, and this NFT is real, is fascinating. There's so many things that I want to talk about just in that, I'm thinking of like the Star Trek transporter conundrum where it's like, did I just kill you and create a copy, or is this like actually who is the real Spencer? But it also makes me think of this really old philosophical mental exercise. It's some dude's boat. I can't remember the name of it, but that's like the name of the mental exercise. It's someone's boat. And so he's like, I want to replace all my wood planks or all of the wood pieces on this oak boat with teak. So the shipmaster one by one replaces all of the oak with teak, and then there's all of this like scrap oak laying in his shipyard, and he puts it all back together in the exact same formation that it was before he disassembled it. Which one is now the real boat? And it's like this is this like weird Chinese puzzle for philosophers for like centuries, like arguing there's no solution, which is the real fucking boat, because this question of identity is like impossible to resolve when you're talking about human subjective opinion. And I don't know, did this dude just solve that problem?
I mean, maybe. That's it's in the same vein as like when, you know, our cells fall off every 7 years, or are the cells that lay on the ground all around about the world, is that us, or are they the new batch of cells that are now walking around in this meat suit? Like, it's a good conundrum. I wonder, he's gotten, I don't know, he might have solved it.
I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, all of that is an interesting philosophy stuff, but the NFT things with real art, to me, actually seems like it almost makes more sense with traditional art to use NFTs than with digital art.
Why is that?
Well, because it's just like a secure way of keeping track of ownership, essentially, right? Not in the way of like, because in the digital file, it's a way of keeping ownership, but it's also meaningless in a way, because like the video or the JPEG or whatever, like everyone can have it, and then someone just says, nope, but I have ownership of it, which, okay, great, like, but I can still have it on my computer. It means nothing. But if you're holding something in your hand, then you have physical ownership of it, and this is just documenting it as it goes along, kind of thing.
And I don't know if I follow. You say that it's anybody can have a copy of the JPEG, but the idea is that those are illegitimate copies, in the same way that, I mean, a forgery is a forgery, a fake is a fake. You know, if I mint a piece of artwork with a NFT, a digital piece of artwork with an NFT, that's the only one of those that will exist.
Yes and no, because the artwork isn't actually in the NFT. The NFT is just a token that has some information in it. It doesn't have the artwork. It doesn't have the video in it. At most, it has like a link to it, but it doesn't have anything in it. It's a file that has a bunch of information in it, but not the digital image. It's actually a much smaller file, from my understanding. What the real file is very, very small, relatively speaking.
I think it's an interesting. You cited the idea of it being like a history of the painting sale, for instance. One of the interesting parts of it is because NFTs can be traded separately from the original painting. Like, you have to buy the NFT in order to buy the painting. But once you buy the painting and the NFT, you can sell the NFT and not sell the painting. They don't have to travel together after that point.
Depending on how it's written in the contract, right? Because like NFTs are essentially smart, right? They're essentially smart contracts. So what it becomes very interesting, because it also adds something very interesting with what you said about the boat conundrum, because theoretically this is the most like messed up thing, but you could essentially buy, if someone was selling the artwork and the NFT together, you could buy an NFT, get the artwork, make a copy of it, sell the NFT and sell the copy, and you essentially sold a forgery.
But this is what I'm talking about. I don't mean to interrupt you.
NFTs make the world really complicated, is what I think.
They are
And
complicated, I will say that.
And I don't want to like try and hand wave the complexity away with oversimplification, but in the course of describing these kinds of things, inevitably words like forgery, copy, all of those words come up. So where I have a hard time